We're gonna go ahead and get started. This is a hotel occupancy tax workshop. Chris Bragiel, our tourism director, brought in some great expertise for us. I'll let him do the introduction, but we're gonna go ahead and get started so that we don't keep everyone here too late.
You bet.
Chris, where do you want us to sit?
Wherever, well, you know, might as well be out here.
Thank
That's what I'm
you.
asking.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, hi, everybody. Yes, this evening we're blessed with the expertise of Justin Bragiel from the Texas Hotel Lodging Association. My initial intention for this meeting was we have new council members, and we have folks who are responsible for administering this fund who may not have heard Justin kind of lay out all the rules. And so this is also useful for folks who are receiving and using the funds for grants. So you'll know what's legal and what's not and how does that work. So Justin's going to go over that, of course, through the lens of elected officials, but the folks who aren't elected officials will still get the basics. And when he's done, anybody who has any questions about the law, Justin can answer them, but also I can answer any questions about the grant program, because as you all know, our deadline is June 14th for next fiscal year's grant. So with
Thanks,
no
Greg.
further ado.
I appreciate that. We've been working together for many, many years now. It's great to be back in Alpine. I've stood in this room many times now, talking about hotel taxes, but their turnover on city council, their turnover amongst city staff, people who want to apply for hotel tax funding. We have some folks visiting from neighboring communities as well too. So I'm going to talk primarily about municipal or city hotel taxes, but there are some special rules for county hotel taxes, some differentiation, because we have some folks from counties here too. I'm going to note where there are differences as well. We do a lot of these seminars. This is my second one today, so if my voice gets a little hoarse, my apologies. We just did one for Pecos a few hours ago. Texas Hotel and Lodging Association is a nonprofit trade association. We were formed in 1903 by a group of hoteliers who were looking to better the industry, get some benefits of working together. And we have a expertise, I would say, in hotel occupancy tax law specifically. We spend a lot of time visiting the communities just like yours about hotel taxes. We answer a lot of questions over the phone, email, etc. about hotel taxes. Our primary members are hoteliers, and a hotel, just for purposes of hotel tax purposes, is really any overnight accommodations rented out for less than 30 days. And so as we talk about hotels and hotel taxes, think about, you know, the short-term rentals that are so prevalent in your communities. Those are hotels for purposes of what we're talking about, just like the traditional limited service, full service hotels you see in the metropolitan areas as well, right? Those are all hotels for hotel tax purposes. So we get a lot of questions from those folks about how they operate their businesses, and a lot of questions from people like you about hotel taxes, how to collect it, how to spend it, what's allowed, what's not allowed, you know, all of those sort of things, right? And we're going to talk about that today. Always happy to answer any questions you may have, so stop me as we go, and we'll dive right on in. So if you're on city council, mayor, county commissioners, or you run a chamber, you apply for hotel tax funding, any of those roles, right, it's important for you to have some basic understanding about the state laws that govern collection and use of hotel occupancy tax revenue, right? And so it's because it's limited, right? I'm going to lay out the state law. And keep in mind here that these are the guideposts that the Texas legislature has put in place for spending hotel tax revenue. Your city, your county may have more restrictive rules and policies on use of hotel tax revenue, and that's great and perfectly appropriate. And Chris will be able to talk about that specifically with Alpine, right? He's the Alpine expert. I'm the state law expert. I'm going to talk about the state law and what's allowed under, not allowed, and allowed under state law. So, hotel taxes in general, what are they? Why do we care? Well, if you're on city government or county government, your primary sources of revenue that fund the operations of this entity, of the city government, are going to be property tax revenue and sales tax revenue, right? And that's true for cities and counties across the state of Texas. primarily property taxes, secondarily sales taxes. And those revenues that you collect for your local community on behalf of the citizens can be used for a broad array of things. Really, anything that benefits the public is permissible for expenditure of those revenue sources. We refer to them as general revenue, GR, right? General, I'm general counsel, I'm a general lawyer. General revenue can be spent for general things. But there are other revenue sources, tax revenue sources in Texas that are more restrictive in nature, and they're referred to oftentimes as a dedicated tax. And if we have a dedicated tax, it means that the state government has limited the ways that we may utilize those revenues once we raise them. The easiest example I can always think of is a hospital district. Right, if your community levies a hospital district property tax, those property tax revenues can only be used for one purpose. We all know what it is, the hospital system, right? Well, hotel taxes are dedicated as well. Most cities in Texas levy a hotel tax. Many counties in Texas levy a hotel taxes. On average, hotel tax rates range between 13 and 17.5%, depending on where we are in the state of Texas. There is a state of Texas 6% hotel tax that applies to every room night sold, every hotel room night sold. And on top of that, there's the municipal and or county hotel tax that applies to that. So we talk about tax rates here for hotel taxes. It's pretty high, right? 13%, 14%, 15%, 17.5%. We're talking about nearly double, or in some cases more than double, the 8.25% sales tax rate, right? So people who spend the night in a hotel in your community are spending a lot of money in taxes. And you know what? Believe it or not, I'm a hotel guy. I'm a hotel lawyer. That's okay. Believe it or not. And I may have a hotel room wants to shoot me for saying this, but it's true. Generally, our industry is okay with that, right? And the reason why we're okay with that is because the local portion of that hotel tax is dedicated to bringing more people to your area long term, doing the fine work that Chris does, doing the work financing convention center, visitor center, historical restoration and preservation. This is an economic development tax that, believe it or not, we as an industry oftentimes ask to be levied on our businesses. We ask for it to be levied on our businesses because we believe that revenue can be utilized for things that bring more people to the area. But before my time, and my board members remember, when Brewster County petitioned the legislature to ask for a hotel tax, the businesses asked for the hotel tax to be levied. But because of that, there are rules on expending tax. It's a high rate, that's why. There is a two-part test for every expenditure of hotel tax revenue. The first part is that every expenditure must directly promote and enhance tourism and the hotel and convention industry. Well, it's a long sentence, right? Every expenditure, not some, not most, the legislature didn't give us any discretion here. Every expenditure must comply with this two-part test. Every expenditure must directly promote tourism and the hotel and convention industry. So I mentioned before, we do a lot of hotel tax seminars, we answer a lot of questions. I get a lot of hypothetical hotel tax questions. Can we use hotel tax revenue for this purpose or that purpose? And I always remember the story. I was brand new in the role, like 15, 16 years ago. I came out to a town in West Texas, did a city council meeting in the evening, spent the night in a hotel in the city, sounds familiar. And I went back home, the mayor called me up a few weeks later, said, hey, thanks for coming, Dustin. Hey, when you stayed at the hotel in our town, do you remember if you tasted the tap water? And I told Mayor, I don't remember. He says, well, you didn't. Could you remember if you did? And our water tastes bad. Whenever we ask people about what they like and don't like about visiting, they always say our water tastes bad. And we know that people staying in a hotel would appreciate and benefit better tasting water. We want to use some hotel tax money for a water treatment. Can they do it? Well, no, you all know the answer is no. That is not a direct promotion of tourism in the hotel convention industry. It also violates a few other parts of the law, but most basically, there's nothing about having a new water treatment plant that would make anybody want to come and spend the night in that town, right? Yeah, it benefits tourists. New sidewalks benefit tourists. Paved roads benefit tourists. Broadband infrastructure benefits tourists. It also benefits residents. That's wonderful, but it's not a reason why somebody's coming to your community and spending the night. Well, what is a direct promotion of tourism in the hotel convention industry? Well, as we say in the law, there needs to be a nexus or a connection between spending that dollar of hot revenue and somebody who's here visiting from out of town and spending the night in a hotel. Maybe it's promoting that event that tourists and hotel guests attend. Maybe it's marketing and branding the area as a tourism destination, a social media presence that you all have. Maybe it's funding that sporting event that tourists and hotel guests come to attend, that historical monument or site that people stop off and visit when they're visiting, right? There needs to be a connection between spending the night in a hotel and spending $1 of this hot revenue. And that's direct connection. Every expenditure must directly promote tourism and the hotel and convention industry. The word "and" is in that sentence a few times, but the word "or" isn't there at all. Tourism and the hotel. We'll start with that. What's a tourist? Who is a tourist? Who's a tourist, Chris?
Anyone who doesn't live here.
Yeah, and anybody who's visiting who doesn't live here. I love that definition. It's so broad and inclusive, right? Somebody drives, some Jeff Davis folks are here today, Fort Davis, people driving in from Fort Davis. If they live in Fort Davis, they're gonna go back to Fort Davis tonight, probably not gonna spend the night, I'd be fair to say. As much as you probably would love to, you're probably gonna go back and spend the night in your own bed. Guess what? They're tourists in here in Alpine for the day. I'm a tourist in Alpine for the day. I happen to be spending the night, but I was a tourist, Texas earlier. It's not enough that we merely promote tourism. That's the point. We have to promote tourism and the hotel and convention industry. And the reason why that has to be the case has to do with that rate I talked about earlier, that tax rate, that high tax rate. The hotel tax was a compromise that dates back to 1969, when the city of Dallas wanted a hotel tax to build their first convention center. That compromise on that tax stays with us today. Every expenditure must directly promote tourism and the hotel and convention industry. You've heard this shorthanded before in one simple phrase. You're gonna wonder why I wasted your time. You know the phrase. Does it put heads in beds? Y'all heard that phrase before? I know some of y'all nodding your head. Yeah, you've heard that phrase before. It's, putting heads in beds. It's benefiting economically the tourism and the hotel industry. And remember, a hotel is a place where somebody spends the night for less than 30 days, whether we're talking about Hampton Inn or we're talking about somebody's short-term rental on Airbnb. That is a hotel for hotel tax purposes. All right, so you want to spend $1 of hotel tax. First thing you got to determine, does it affect the head in the bed? Does it have economic activity in your hotel? If yes, it does. Great. We've got to fit it into one of the applicable categories for under the tax code, in chapter 351 or 352 of the tax code. We'll talk about all the categories. We're not going to be here all night, I promise. I want to go to dinner at some point. First category. First category is convention centers and visitor information centers. Two different things in one category. Let's start with the convention center. A convention center is defined as a facility that's owned or managed by a city or a county government that's primarily used for meetings involving tourists. We know what a tourist is already. We talked about that. Somebody visiting from out of town. We think it gets handled probably on the ownership requirements, right? But that facility, the meetings that are held at that facility, most of them primarily used, has to involve people who are visiting from out of town. That's the convention center or the convention industry of that first part of the two markets. Right, so we've got a facility right here that's owned by a city or county government. And if more than half of the events and activities, look at calendar of events, involve people from out of town, we can use city hotel tax revenue to finance that convention center. I don't care what we call it. We can call it a convention center, we can call it a civic center, we for county, sometimes we call it an expo center. We can call it whatever we want, a conference center, come up with whatever creative name you want. As long as more than half of the meetings in that facility involve people from out of town, we can use hotel tax funds to manage that facility, construct it, enlarge it, equip it, staff it, anything associated with it. We can use hotel tax revenue for that purpose. That's true of cities, and that's true of counties with hotel tax. In that same category is a visitor information center. You're more likely to fund a visitor information center with hotel tax revenue than you probably are a convention center. A visitor information center is a site or building that's used to disseminate information to tourists. It's that simple. Doesn't matter who owns it, doesn't matter who operates it. It can be a chamber of commerce, it can be a for-profit, non-profit, city government, county government. It can be any of those things. It could be as small as a brochure rack, it could be as large as a big standalone facility. As long as it's used to disseminate information to tourists, and that's its primary use, we can use hotel tax revenue for that visitor information center. Oftentimes, we'll see a visitor information center run concurrently, managed by a chamber of commerce, as an example, right? Where there's multiple uses of that facility and of the staff in that facility. They're doing multiple things. Chamber's a good example of this, right? You got a chamber office that serves as the area's visitor information center. You have chamber staff that are doing different things. They're promoting tourism, I hope, right? That's the hope. But that's not necessarily the primary mission of the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce was probably founded to promote businesses overall in the area, right? The commerce part of Chamber of Commerce, right? And so if we have a chamber staff member, or if we're talking about the office space itself, and it's used for multiple things, including a visitor information center and chamber staff, we're gonna look at the portion of the time and use that's designated as a visitor information center, and that's the most part of the operational cost of that facility that can be paid for with hotel tax. All right, category one. That's category one. Any questions so far? All right, category two, really easy. The registration of convention delegates. You have a big convention or conference, you need to pay folks to work, the registration, booths, tables for that convention. You can use hotel tax revenue for that purpose. We primarily see this category utilized most with large convention halls, you know, the George R. Brown in Houston, something like that. But it could be here too, it could be anywhere. The registration of convention delegates, category two, old category. Category three is my favorite category. Hope you have a favorite. Mine's category three. Advertising and promotion, or as the law says, advertising and conducting solicitations to attract tourists and hotel guests to the municipality or its vicinity. Advertising and promotion. All right, well, what's advertising and promotion, first of all? Give some examples. Some come to mind, right? TV, Facebook, internet, right? Print advertising, billboards, maybe, you know, maybe radio. Yeah, all those things are advertising, right? Familiarization tours or fan tours, that might not be a phrase you're all that familiar with, but we're familiar with it in our industry. That's where we bring meeting planners or event planners to the area and we get them to see what features and facilities we have to offer. Maybe they bring their meeting or their sporting event or whatever it is to the area. Maybe it's bringing writers and travel authors to the area, or is that phrase I hate, influencers, right? I hate it, but you know, influencers to the area, right? We're gonna maybe pay a possibility with bringing them out here. I remember years ago, we sit on the Brewster County Tourism Council board. And years ago, I remember going to one of the board meetings, and they were talking about using hotel tax money to bring an author from National Geographic magazine out to do a story about the Big Bend region, right? And they were using hotel tax revenue, or discussing using hotel tax revenue to pay for the costs associated with driving that author around, making sure he had a good place to stay and good meals and a guide the whole time. They're using hotel tax revenue for all of it. You know, they're smart, right? They know that they can buy an ad in National Geographic magazine. It'll run in that, you know, an issue or two, maybe on their website. But if they get an article written about that, that's searched, live in archives forever, how much more valuable is that? Hotel tax revenue to be paid, you should pay for that, right? Advertising and promotion. I love this category because it's nice and broad. Maybe you've got an event or an activity that doesn't fit within one of these other categories, but you want to use hotel tax revenue to advertise it. You can do that with hotel tax revenue to advertise that event at tourist and hotel tax event. The other thing to know about this category, and this is going to be true only for cities, is that there's a minimum expenditure associated with advertising and promotion. Right? Counties don't have this requirement, but cities do. Remind me, Chris, for Alpine, is it 50%? 50% Alpine. Alpine's got special rules. And Alpine has special rules. At least 50% of your revenue must be spent on advertising and promotion. We tried to repeal that. We got real close. We tried to repeal that requirement years ago. Didn't quite get it over the finish line. We're happy to work with y'all if you want to go for a repeal again. At least half of the money in Alpine must be spent on advertising and promotion. If you're in the city of Marfa, that's 1/7 your minimum, right? 1% of your 7% rate. In one of the other cities, that's the requirement. Counties generally do not have this minimum expenditure requirement associated.
Justin, what do you consider promotion?
Advertising and promotion, it's really going to be anything that we do to spend money on to get the word out about a particular event or activity or reason to come visit, right? So, you know, maybe it's the cost associated with running an ad. That would be an easy one, right? But maybe one that may not be as obvious to you would be the familiarization tours or bringing meeting planners out to the area, right? That might be a promotion. Right, you know, maybe we've got to do other things, you know, to get people. I tell you, in big cities in the state of Texas, and this is true across the country, really, but in big cities in the state of Texas, what they will do is use hotel tax money under this category to give an incentive, an economic incentive, money, right, cash, essentially, to a meeting planner in order for them to bring their big convention or conference to the area, or alternatively, maybe what they will do is they'll use hotel tax revenue to pay the costs associated with the rental space for the convention center, right? Convention center's got, costs a lot to rent that thing, as you might imagine, right? But you've got a big conference, the convention coming, and the destination marketing organization or the city itself, they say, you know what? We're gonna give you, I don't know, make up a number, $50,000, and we're gonna apply that 50K from hot revenue to the rental facility cost for the convention center, so that you are more enticed to bring your next meeting to Dallas, Texas, as opposed to, I don't know, New Orleans, Louisiana, right? That's the game there for these big convention centers. For advertising and promotion, it's a somewhat of a broad category. Another reason why I like it, right? You know, you may have an event that doesn't qualify for hotel tax funds to cover the costs associated with the event. You can use hotel tax revenue at least for advertising and promotion. That's one more question, Chris.
So you mentioned, like an incentive payment.
Yes.
As a promotional.
Yes.
That's great to know, because the council has approved in the past a film lodging rebate,
Sure.
which I have been putting it in arts.
Yes.
Because it was,
Well, so it's gonna fit in both categories.
if it can be in advertising, that's a lot easier because we have the.
You have a path on arts, right? And that is, you know, a challenge. So if you just focus on the advertising part of it, advertising outline as a, so let's run through counter hypotheticals, right? Hypothetical one is you want to invest in marketing and advertising to advertise Alpine as a film-friendly destination. Doesn't matter, well, maybe it does matter, but bring a small film production here, bring a big film production here. Either way, we want you to run your film production here. And so we're going to invest as a community in getting ourselves put on various lists as a film-friendly destination. We're going to work with the Motion Picture Industry Association about getting Alpine on whatever list they may have. We may advertise in trade magazines, right? Okay, that's all going to be advertising and promoting. Okay, that's not going to come into the cap. However, if we are going to say, all right, now we've got a project in mind, we've got a specific thing, you know, we want to be filmed here, and that entity's applying for a hotel tax grant in order to offset the cost associated with producing that film event, that's going to be subject to the cap on the arts category. Okay. Right, so it's going to be a little bit fact dependent, I think, and so, you know, we can work through every one of those, you know, and try and get you there. And that's a good actually, you know, segue for the next category, which is arts related. Before I go there, any other questions about advertising? Well, yes, ma'am.
What are the impacts on our community of that 50% cap? Talk about one for THLA legislative.
Yeah, the idea, I don't know that I can tell you exactly what the impacts are, but I will tell you it's unique to Alpine, right? And Alpine has, goes back a very long time. People that were in this role were far before me. And limited Alpine is spending at least 50% of the revenue on advertising, and then also capping arts at 15%, historical restoration at 15%, right? Which is true across cities, across the state of city, as well as those caps. You know, the challenge was, and the reason why, probably going back 3 years ago, we talked about repealing this, was to give Alpine the same authority as other cities, to give you all the same flexibility, say, as your not competitors, but friends, maybe down the road, who are not so limited in, you know, these particular categories and study expenditures. I will tell you, selfishly, as a lodging person and the person who represents hotels, I love advertising. We get more ROI from any other category. But at the same time, I'm very clear-eyed about how communities work with each other and compete with each other. And back then, this was before the pandemic, must be 4 or 5 years ago now. You know, we met with the hotel community here in this room, and we asked the hoteliers how you all feel about removing the limits specific to Alpine and make Alpine work the same way as every other city, virtually every other city in the state of Texas when it comes to spending revenue. And they were supportive of it at this time. I don't know about today, but they were then. And there was the mess of the legislature had nothing to do with Alpine specifically. It died on the vine when a whole bunch of bills were killed over a big social issue that had nothing to do with Alpine specifically. That's also the same session. Remember, we tried to pass dark skies legislation for y'all too. That was the same session of the same bill that went down then. And so, yeah, it limits the ability to use hotel tax revenue for other things. But look, if you're not a big sporting destination, I'm putting that as an example, right? So like, I just can't take this. Texas is a big sports tourism destination. That's the Permian. That's their leisure market. It's sports tourism, right? And so they want more money available to advertise advertise and put on sporting events, primarily youth sporting events, but it could be adult sporting events as well, but amateur sporting events. Alpine has more limited revenue available to do that. Doesn't mean you legally can't, but because you have to spend half your revenue on advertising, there's less revenue that would be available for sports events, right? And maybe you don't care. Maybe Alpine says, that's not our game, no pun intended anyway. So we don't really feel like we need to do that, but it does create more limitations on the use of the event. Chris?
Just to address that, my general feeling has been, the 50%, sometimes it's hard to meet. And we sometimes had to scramble at the end of the year and make less strategic ad buys than I would prefer. In general, I see it as it's mandating best practice. That is not a bad idea anyway. I would be in favor of 35 or 40, you know, it would be, that would give us a little more latitude, but at the same time, not a big deal.
You know, the other thing we've done on these two, Chris, here is to hold harmless the marketing budget for the community is when we've opened this up is we've, you know, required some minimum expenditure, either a percentage or a minimum ROI, right? The city's going to use money for this new purpose. They've got to show, or at least, you know, back up with additional money for marketing and make sure that it's viable, right? Because the last thing we want to see as an industry is again, not to put the outline, a city engage in some sort of mass building project and then not have any money left over to market them, right? To advertise and market. I mean, that's a disaster for us. Yes, ma'am.
Question about advertising dollars, which is, in previous years, there's been a rule that 15%, I think, of, and Chris, I don't know if this is still happening, that, of advertising budget, funds.
Sure.
Is that still in place? Is that
Yeah.
a city rule? Or
Yeah,
is that?
that's a city rule.
That is absolutely the city rule. Before that, it was zero. Because the city wanted all of that money that comes out of grant to go into the ads. So, what they did not want is, somebody to, well, I got $5,000 in advertising, I'm gonna hire a videographer for $5,000 to document my thing. And then no ads actually get them. And that is, cause that's a fine expenditure. It's, if you use it the next year to promote, that's great, but we want you to promote that. And so I actually advocated for, well, let's give something because you gotta design things and photography is great, you know. So, but that's where we got to 15% of the advertising.
Building the infrastructure.
It's not the law thing, it's.
Does the state have any rules into that? Like, for example, you talked about inviting a reporter. Right, and paying for hotels for that person.
Sure.
Those are sort of outside of what I would think of as, I mean, that's not an ad buy.
That's not, it's advertising, that's advertising, so the language of the code, advertising and conducting solicitations to attract tourists and hotel guests to the area. Very old language, not typically what we think of as advertising and promotion. But, you know, we'll look at what the plain meaning of those words are today in the community today. And commonly in the hotel and lodging and tourism industry, that is inclusive of doing things like bringing in a meeting. And I'm sorry, I cut off your question.
No, I just want to know if there, because I love that idea, and for some of the events that we produce in my area, that would be a great idea to do. And I'm wondering what the limitations are, and I'm sure I don't know if there's a long list. I don't need to go over that now, but I'm just wondering if there's any sort of list of stuff that's like acceptable or things that are not. Just so you know, but
there's examples, right? And so there are examples, and you know, there's an association of convention and visitor bureaus, where this group gets together statewide and they talk about and hire experts and have folks, you know, address their panels about how they're using hotel tax revenue under this category specifically, what's working for them and what's not, and you know, what types of marketing works, what type of advertising works for them, what they found effective. And what are the limits on this? I think, look, as long as we can reasonably agree that the thing that you have in mind fits within the definition of advertising and connecting solicitations, I think we're all good, right? Because the question some of you may be having in your head is, well, hang on a second, who polices this thing anyway, right? Who, you didn't ask, but you're thinking, right? Hotel taxes are collected locally. One of the few taxes that are really interesting to think about. The city of Alpine collects hotel taxes in the city of Alpine. City of Alpine does not collect sales tax from, you know, the gas stations and restaurants, right? But they collect hotel taxes from the hotels and all of the short-term rentals. Same thing goes with the counties. Counties collect their hotel taxes locally. They spend those dollars locally, right? And so the elected officials for those cities and those counties determine within the bounds of the law what they should spend hotel tax revenue on. And sometimes there are some gray areas. There are, right? Some things are like, well, we're not really sure. Does this fit within the law? And you can ask me, and I will probably tell you this is a gray area, but we think it's probably okay, or it's a gray area, but we think this is just outside of the bounds. But beyond that, once we get past that, once we determine, okay, it's maybe a gray area, or maybe it's not a gray area, but it's something that we don't all agree on. It's up to the city government, the county government to determine whether or not they are comfortable spending hotel tax revenue in this way. And if my organization were to be upset about that, say, we're gonna challenge you on, right? Well, the way we do that is we come here to meetings like this, or maybe more intimate meetings with your elected officials, and we talk about it, say, you know, this doesn't really seem all that right. And I like to look perspective. I don't like looking back at how things were done in the past, right? I don't think that's very good. I don't want retribution. I don't like thinking, I want to think about, look, maybe the way you've been using hotel tax revenue as a community isn't squarely within the law, hasn't been. Let's fix it. Let's going forward. Let's do a little better. And we're going to educate you all. I'm not going to bring a lawsuit. If I brought a lawsuit against your city, I would have to show that your city was acting in an arbitrary and capricious manner. That's a really high burden to me. That burns the relationship that we have developed in this community for 30 or 40 years, right? I don't want to do that. I want to work with Texas Municipal League. I want to work with the Association of Counties. I want to work with the AG's office. We're all going to get on the same page. That's how we find solutions to questions about whether or not hotel taxes should or shouldn't be used. I sit down with PML and with TAC before every legislative session. We go over our whole agenda, legislative agenda. We talk about these are the changes we want to make to hotel tax law. Do you have an issue with it? What is your issue? What do you want to see done? For cities and counties, how can we work together to make that happen? That's how we make a difference. We find
So as members, we could like.
Yes. Absolutely, we can talk about it. We may or may not agree, but we will talk about what that looks like and make a determination as to whether or not we think we can draw up legislation that's going to be work for the lodging industry, for the tourism industry, and for the city of Alpine. Some things are never going to be workable. We're never going to reach a solution. I'll be very candid on that. There was a bill in the last legislative session that would have allowed communities out here to use hotel tax revenue for highways and broadband infrastructure. I love Senator Blanco. He's wonderful. No. We're not going to agree to that because that is something that opens up use of hotel tax revenue in a way that's never been done before and would allow for this very, very high tax rate to be used for any public purpose. And that's going to be on the that. But if you come to me and say, Justin, we really want to build a sports facility, or Justin, we really want to do more dark skies related maintenance work, right? Or Justin, we really want to use hotel tax revenue and then name your tourism objective. We could probably get there.
Our infrastructure can't support.
Your infrastructure can't support hotels. And so the question for me would be, how do you typically fund infrastructure, right? Just like any other business that's operating in the city of Alpine, right? And infrastructure isn't sufficient to support it. You build that infrastructure via fees, assessment, and property tax revenues on those businesses. And so our answer to that is we don't want to be singled out as a tax revenue source. If you're going to tax businesses for infrastructure, tax restaurants, tax retail, tax them all equally for those infrastructure improvements that they're all going to benefit from, right? If it's specific to hotels, well, then you can do an assessment on those hotels, right? If the plumbing infrastructure, the wastewater lines, whatever it is, aren't sufficient to meet the demand and growth of that community, right? Because of the hotel industry's growth there, then you can raise the fees you charge those hotels. And by the way, they're going to pay for every dollar or every gallon of water they're going to use, right, via their metering system. The fuller they are, the busier those hotels are, the more money you're going to get out of them in property tax revenue, right? Because we're valued on the income approach. So the more income our businesses take in, our hotel businesses take in, the more money you're going to pay in property taxes, right? That's how we look at those particular issues with relating to infrastructure. I get it. I come out here a lot. I understand infrastructure is an issue, right? But we will generally oppose legislation that opens up hotel tax revenue use for general infrastructure related purposes.
What if it's within a specific mileage of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same, it's the same answer, that's been proposed before, and we in the past have proposed that, in fact. I think that the answer is probably gonna be no there, but look, you know, again, if you've got a specific tourism related use, we might be able to get there. But we talk about it.
Let me answer Mark's question really quick. So one of the great things with the advertising category is that it can be really creative in how you promote. And my definition is usually, does that expenditure constitute an invitation to somebody out of the area? And the production side is, are we producing a thing that we would then use to make that invitation? You know, but so as long as that money is being used to actively invite somebody, we're really open and encourage creative uses, creative idea approaches to promotion, because buying a magazine ad is only one way, and we do those. But you know, these days we do them in co-op with Martha and Fort Davis because they're super expensive and they work to a point, but it's just that point. So we want to do lots of different approaches. And in fact, I love one of the great things about the grant program is that all these different minds come together to promote all kinds of different things and they try different. And then I can find out, that's the dream is that I actually get here. How did that work? You know, let's try it. And then I can share that with everybody else who's getting grants, and I can do it myself for the general. So I encourage brainstorming and just run it by me, and then if we feels like we're inviting people from out of town, let's try it.
Yes.
Quick question, on 50% for Alpine, was that actually pushed by TML and the Hotel Lodging Association? Or just-
Now, yes,
It was local.
it was local, and again, if we're going back to, I mean, what was this, 2001, 2, 3? Long time ago, you know, 20 something years ago. And my memory was before I went to law school. I was told later that it was the local hotels meeting with various.
I'm actually talking about one of the last 5 years, when they were trying to get.
We were trying to go to change the law to allow Alpine to follow the same category caps as all the other cities. 2019?
Jessica wanted to put some money aside for building.
Yeah, it was convention center.
And yeah, it was that she had an idea of building a hotel slash.
Where I'm going with this is from city council could do a resolution, shoot that over to TML, and then they would have TML support and the Hotel Lodging Association support. Last time it was pushed, was it supported by both organizations or just one?
It was supported, there was a city council resolution. I don't remember if TML had anything on point. I mean, they were supportive of it because they had a member city that was supportive of it. We were pushing it. We was primarily our bill. And along with the folks that were doing the dark sky stuff. So yeah, if y'all are interested in doing that again, pushing forward again, yeah. we'd be happy to help.
I don't think TNO will
But they were supportive of it. I don't think they were on the resolution, right? But they were supportive of it.
So, and you mentioned that it built, and it also included the dark sky.
He did.
So if we took them as two separate approaches.
Sure.
Instead of trying to.
Yes.
Organize an event using art. Money, that money used for infrastructure. So when we raise the money, we can use the value.
So it's the question, maybe I don't want you to understand your question correct. If you use hotel tax revenue, and now I'm not talking about using the revenue directly, but using the revenue and putting something together like a festival or
I know,
something.
but the city gives that money away, what was the city by itself organized? It's the money, but if it is needs.
Oh, so if you gave that money to another organization and that organization, could that organization then do infrastructure improvements? Is that the question?
What here, as I understand, if the city wants to have a party, invite people from out of town, who then spend money at the party, and that money goes to infrastructure. Is that right?
That's okay.
Okay. So you could use hotel, let's just take the first part. Could you use hotel tax money to throw a party? Okay. And the answer is, you could use hotel tax money to advertise and promote that party, right? Because that.
A concert or something like that.
Maybe, okay, so let's talk about concert, that's the arts category, that's the next category we're gonna talk about. So we wanna help use hotel tax money to hire a band, right, and pay for the costs associated with that band's performance. Right? Do we use hotel tax revenue for that purpose? The answer would be yes, provided that tourists and hotel guests are likely to attend that event. Right, that fits within, we can advertise and promote it, that's a category. We could pay for the costs associated with bringing in the stage, hiring security, hiring the band, bringing in whatever else needs to happen to enable that concert to occur. We could use the arts category because it's live music, right? We could use hotel tax revenue to pay the costs. Now let's take it to the next step. Okay, now we also want to sell tickets to that event, right? As a city, maybe we use somebody else to do it, but we want to sell tickets to that event. Can we sell tickets to that event, even though we use hotel tax revenue to pay the costs associated with putting it on? Yes, provided again that tourists and hotel guests are going to attend that concert, right? I don't care about how many, as long as some do. Okay, next step. We've raised this money from ticket sales. What can we do with those ticket sales? Well, that's not tax revenue. Right, that's revenue from the sale of, and a chamber could do this, or another organization. That's revenue from selling tickets to the event, or maybe selling booth space to vendors that are gonna sell their own goods, food, beverage at the event. Right, we have some revenue coming in from that, not tax revenue. We just whatever, we as a city can do whatever we want with that hotel tax, or not, sorry, not hotel tax, with that general revenue. Put it towards infrastructure, pay the city manager's salary, pay the police department. You can do any of that with that revenue, right? Because that's not hotel tax revenue. The part of the law that's going to govern hotel tax revenues under 351, that's going to deal with the actual expenditure of that hotel tax revenue for that thing, the concert. What you would not be able to do is say, you know what, forget all that mess. We're just going to take that dollar hotel tax revenue and we're going to use that to repair our sewer pipe. Yeah, doesn't fit within any of the categories. Not a direct promotion of tourism and hotel activity. Also violates another provision of the code that says you may not use hotel tax revenue for general city infrastructure or general city purposes, right? So yes, you could. How will you consider the word wash the money? That's not even what you're doing. If you could use hotel tax money to fund a particular thing. Well, and you're not doing it. Right. Now, you're not doing that. You're not doing that. You can use that money to fund it. Just like you can fund money, you've used, or to fund money, you can use, but no, that's like to fund, advertising that brings people to the area, and those people that come and they hopefully spend a night in hotels. That's great for me. But they're also, shopping in your stores, your restaurant, et cetera, generating sales tax revenue for you, right? You're able to use that revenue for any public purpose, right? So yes, you may do it that way. And I got questioned a few hours ago, and it's, can we use hotel tax money for a for-profit event? And the answer is, well, code doesn't say you can't, right? So yeah, you can, provided that the way we're using this hotel tax revenue is consistent with chapter 351. Talked about it already now, arts, you may use hotel tax revenue for the arts. The tax code has a list of things that are forms of art that can be funded with hotel taxes. I won't belabor the list. The most common ones are going to be things like music, right? Live music. Other types of performing arts, so maybe that's theater, dance, that kind of thing. Could be visual arts, could be things like painting or sculpture, could be in a public square, maybe not, right? Maybe it's that mural that everybody hopefully stops and takes their selfie in front of and puts it on Instagram, right? You can use hotel tax money for those purposes. The arts, you can use hotel tax revenue on the arts under a very broad interpretation of the term art, but there is this limit, 15%. The city may spend no more than 15% of its annual hot revenue on all arts-related events and activities put together. You raise $1 million in hotel tax revenue a year, you can spend no more than $150,000 on arts-related events. Whether we're talking about that concert or we're talking about, the paying the artist to repaint that mural, it's all going to come or count towards that same limit, right? That 15% is not a per expenditure limit, but rather an annual budget. So yeah, $1 million a year, for example, in hotel tax revenue as a city, $150,000 for all art-related events combined is going to be your cap. Counties do not have that limitation; they do not have that cap. If you're from county government, that cap does not apply to you.
Yeah, and in terms of murals, this comes up a lot. The city's policy, as I understand it, is that the city will fund public art, but it has to be under the control of the city. So ideally, on city property, But if not on city property, there needs to be a very explicit agreement between the property owner and the city to ensure the maintenance and the just continued existence of that thing. And if the city's not gonna fund something on someone's building, that they might sell it and it gets painted over the next.
Yeah, that's good. And that's a local policy that makes a lot of sense to me, a local policy. Historical restoration and preservation. You may utilize hotel tax revenue for historical restoration and preservation. The terms historical restoration and preservation are not further defined in the text. But we're going to fall back on the plain and ordinary meaning of those words as they're used in the community. So, for example, in the code, there is not a requirement that a historical site be listed on a state or national historic register. You may locally have that requirement. Your city may say, look, we're going to use hotel tax revenue for this historical building, monument, whatever it is. It's got it, it's the state of Texas. They have to have it on their list of historical sites, but that's not state law, right? You are open to interpret reasonably what those phrases mean for your community. Historical restoration and preservation means this thing has a historical track record or history associated with it. So we can't use this category to fund things that didn't exist at a historical point in time when we're talking about that particular thing, right? I always use the same boring example, but it's, I think, relevant. I used to sit on the Historic Landmarks Commission of the City of Austin, and every year, the German Free School, the oldest public school in the city of Austin, or was the oldest public school in the city of Austin, would apply for a hotel tax grant for our commission to use to build a temporary stage for South by Southwest music. You know, it's on the same thing. There is no historical record for that South by Southwest music stage, right? You can ask the Arts Commission, but not the Historical Commission for that, right? We'll fund museums, historical monuments, that we can use it to fund historic Main Street, maybe a historic port. You can use hotel tax revenue for all of those things, provided that that thing that we're preserving is visited by tourists and hotel guests. Any questions about that? There's a 15% cap for cities, no cap for county. Man.
So I have a question. If you have, say, murals,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a lot of history,
Sure.
and maybe even some of them are educational about the culture.
Yeah.
Can you do where a person comes and they can.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Sure. Sure. I would put that more in the historical category, I think. Like, so like, and you know, you may have a historic walking tour, like a self-guided historical walking tour would be an example, right? Where you have this QR code and I have my earbuds in and I can scan it. And then there's, you know, somebody's going to play a video recording telling me about this thing that I'm looking at, right? That's historical restoration and preservation. That's the key of that, the preservation, right? We're not restoring anything there, but we're preserving our history with that particular category or with that particular use. And, you know, if tourists and hotel guests are likely to utilize it, we can use hotel tax revenue for that purpose. And that's the idea. That's the point of this particular category, right? Is order, and we know, you know, particularly in this corner of Texas, that's a big reason why people come through, or maybe they extend their stay, or they're more likely to come back again in the future.
So, okay, 4 days. It would not typically be permissible for a government entity to claim the restoration or preservation of a historic building if that building is not primarily visited by tourists. Say it's used to house government offices, that sort of thing. If I could see, okay, for instance, maybe a courthouse.
Maybe a courthouse, because we're going, yeah.
If they're promoting it as, hey, tourists, come here, there's something to look at in here, right? But what about a building that is, you know, just a government office?
Sure, okay.
Is that?
Okay, so let's talk about the courthouse, or a courthouse, not each courthouse, but a historic courthouse that may or may not exist in a neighboring county, or this county, and whether or not we can use hotel tax money for that purpose, and then contrast that with maybe a different governmental building that may not have that same track record of visitation by tourists, right? So the code basically states, and basically it does state, that every expenditure must directly promote and have tourism and the hotel for many of these categories, like historical restoration and preservation, the code does not have some sort of minimum threshold of visitation associated with it in order for that historical site or attraction to qualify for hotel tax funding. I selfishly wish it did, but it does not. The code does not say that. And I would not say that I can't read something in the code that doesn't exist. There are other categories in the code that have that specific ROI component. Historical restoration and preservation does not have it. Arguably, several visitors a year, a visitor a year would be enough to meet the requirements of stipulation that tourism and hotel activity occur at that historical site or attraction. The main courthouse that's on a main thoroughfare that's seen by just about everybody, or really everybody that drives through the community, right? I don't think there's a question in the world that tourists and hotel guests are going to visit or see at least that historical site or attraction. And if the city or county government decides that that's something they want to maintain with their hotel tax revenue, that's perfectly allowable under state law. Absolutely is. If we're talking about then maybe an ancillary building, I think I know what we're talking about. An ancillary building that is not likely to be seen by those same people just driving through. Then the question would be, are any tourists or hotel guests likely to see that facility once it's been preserved? It's continuing to be preserved. And the answer is yes, but not many, right? Some people will see it, but there will be very few. I think we have a lawful use of hotel tax revenue because the code doesn't specify we can't use it. But then I'm going to ask you, if you were on county or city government, should you be using hotel tax revenue? So because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. There's a lot of competing uses for this hotel tax revenue. If we understand that the goal of using this hotel tax revenue is to bring more people to the area overall, and I can get into whether or not the residents want more people here. I know where I am. That issue aside, that's the goal right behind this. And so should we be using hotel tax revenue? I walk away from that conversation. I go back to Austin, right? You call me, you ask me whether or not I think we have a legal use of hotel tax revenue. I think we do. It's not for me to say you shouldn't use hotel tax revenue for that purpose. That's the local decision, right? I have an opinion about it, but I'm probably gonna keep that opinion myself. And so, yes.
Well, and how much does maintenance of those buildings fall under like preservation?
Sure.
I mean, just general maintenance.
Good, that's a good question. It's a good question. What about ongoing maintenance and operation?
Yeah.
Right, and so I think here, the codes, first of all, just say what's the language of the code? Well, it doesn't specify, right? The word maintenance doesn't appear in historical restoration and preservation, right? But if we can assume that the legislature means by preserve that some ongoing maintenance is necessary, mowing the lawn so it doesn't look terrible when people visit it, right? We're painting it so the structure doesn't rot and fall apart. Replacing the roof when it has a hole in it so the whole thing doesn't collapse, right? We can all agree that that type of maintenance is necessary to preserve that facility. However, if we're going to go so far as to say, oh, but this building also houses city or county workers who are doing other things that are not related to tourism or even historical restoration and preservation, can we use hotel tax money to pay for those government employee salaries because they happen to work in a historic structure? The answer is, I mean, the question is, yeah, right? No, the answer is no, right? And so I think, yes, maintenance is probably allowable in most cases, but it's all gonna be a matter of degree. How far can we go down this road? But,
Yeah, I'm speaking from memory and I could be wrong, but does the statute say something about historical preservation project?
yeah, projects and activities.
Yeah, so, okay, so what's a project?
Well, project,
Can you fit maintenance into that?
well, I mean,
Are you trying to go with activity?
I go with activities, I think, more than anything here, right? I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think about project as like a one and done kind of thing, right? Like we're gonna paint it, we're gonna rebuild it, we're gonna replace the slate roof or whatever it is, right? That's a project, I think, but I
Getting close to a capital type of idea.
yes, but I think
Capital expenditure, not necessarily, but moving in that direction.
right, I think projects and activities though could be so broad as to include, ongoing maintenance and operation of that facility, but again, it's a matter of degree, right? How far can we go down this road? Is mowing the lawn in front of the historic courthouse, is that preservation? I think it is. I don't think people are likely gonna visit it if there's so many, weeds, growing so high, nobody wants to see it, right? So I
wanna go hunting.
yeah, maybe, we're right, yeah. So,
I wouldn't promote that.
So that's up to the local community to determine what they consider to be within the definition of historical restoration and preservation. Because I mentioned earlier, the code does not, as an example, specify that a thing be listed on a state or national historic registry as an example, nor does the code say it's gotta be, I don't know, I'm feeling pretty historic right now, over 45 years of age, right? Like, it doesn't say that, right? It just says historical restoration and preservation. So you as a community, or we all as a community, make a determination via our elected officials, whether or not we think something meets the definition of historical restoration and preservation. As long as that agreement is reasonable, that's all good.
There's a second part.
Sure.
If, and state's building is owned by another state. Or this,
It's not. There may be a question from, a resource allocation as to whether or not we want to spend money on that state facility, right? Like the county or city may say, well, I don't know if I want to spend local tax revenue on a state asset. You really probably should go the other way around, right? The state should be spending money on us. But if your question is,
it's like a matching fund.
yeah, if your question is just to keep your policy and politics at home, to give you the legal answer, yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
Sure, I mean, nothing prohibits you from doing it, it's just gonna be a question of whether or not you wanna do it. Yeah. Good question.
This category for 15%.
15% for the city of Alpine, 15% for the city of Marfa, 15% for the city of Presidio, 50% for any city just about, not a limit for any of the counties in the area. Okay, there are counties that do have a cap, but none of them in the tri-county area. Okay, so that's historical restoration and preservation, just a few more categories to talk about. Sporting events. You may utilize hotel tax revenue for sporting events in which the majority of the participants are tourists and in which there are substantial economic activity in area hotels. I talked about this regarding Pecos a little while ago. This is available in cities and counties. You may use hotel tax revenue. You can always advertise and promote a sporting event. But what about the costs associated with hosting a sporting event, right? You have a road race, paying the sheriff's deputies to shut down the roads. You've got a softball tournament, paying for the umpires to come in, team transportation costs, awards for the teams, food and beverage, lodging costs, awards, umpires, those sort of things, right? The costs associated with hosting the sporting event, aside from advertising. You use hotel tax revenue for those costs, provided that the majority of the people that are participating are tourists, outside the area, right? Not local Little League. And provided there's substantial economic activity in area hotels. It's a vague term, substantial economic activity area hotels. We wrote it vague. We wrote it vague because if you determine what works for you, it's going to be different from your neighbors to the north, south, or east, or west, right? And so you determine what's going to be workable for you as far as substantial economic activity. But the idea here is this may be able, or if you attract that sporting event, you weren't otherwise able to land in the area, right? That hopefully those people will come for a long weekend, spend a lot of money with their families, and then they leave, and you never knew they were here except for the fact that the businesses are all doing a little bit better. That's the point of this, right? So sporting events in which the majority of consumers are tourists. Any questions about that? Yes, sir.
Say you host a race, could you give away purse money?
Yes. Yes.
Is there anything off limits as far as,
Yes, so what would be off limits would be some sort of a permanent infrastructure improvement to a sports facility as a result of it, right? So an easier example would be like, we have a softball field, right? We want to host some big softball tournament, but we know we're gonna have to buy bleachers, new lighting, and a new scoreboard in order to make that happen, right? Can't use hotel tax revenue under this particular category. We could do something like maybe rent the bleachers, pay for the police officers to work security, bring in the porta potties, pay for the team's awards, bring in the umpires. But we talk about actually making a permanent improvement to the physical aspects of the property. That's a different category that's only available to a limited number of cities and no counties. And so we have to look at getting legislation specific to you in order to enable that to happen. So there are some limits on this, but if we talk about costs specifically associated with this particular sporting event, again, provide the majority of the people that are participating in tourists and the substantial economic activity. No, there's a wide array of things you can use hotel tax revenue for, right? Awards, transportation, lodging costs, right? Just drove into the Permian when oil and gas prices are high and they want to have a UIL tournament, say in Monahans, Texas. Those high schools, they can't afford to stay at a hotel in Monahans. right? But the room rates are too high. So they're gonna use hotel tax revenue to help those teams offset the cost of their lodging and their food, right, in order to enable that UIL tournament to be held at that sports facility. That's why we wrote this category into the law, to enable that stuff to happen. Those oil field workers are gonna be together no matter what, right? They're gonna come no matter what. They're wonderful, they bring a lot of economic to the area. But if this town wants to have more going on than oil and gas activity, this is how they're gonna go about it.
Define sport.
No, purposely, again, you define sport as long as it's reasonable, right? There was a time in the law where sports were limited to flag football, softball, and basketball. We pulled those out. Pull those out. Rodeos allowed. I'm a marathon runner. Marathons are allowed. Bike racing allowed. Road racing allowed. Right? All of those things. The only thing that I don't think quite gets us there, and again, I know in Texas, like barbecue, probably not really a sport. I get that question periodically with barbecue concerns.
Have you ever heard of a utility?
Is this where the guys like, it's sort of like a utility version of like the logging stuff, right? Right?
Kind of, sort of, but they go through infrastructure repairs and challenges and location.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with.
As you should, sport, as you should. Okay, if it's an event, okay, now
We'll bring in other cities
to compete on this, okay, all right, well, let's visit, maybe we can find a way to get there.
And they're staying in our hotel.
They stay in your hotel, yeah, they're paying it, but we could visit with you about that, yeah. And I look,
It really is a thing,
I get it,
Kirsten sent an email about it.
yeah,
It's kind of a friendly competition for utility
Okay.
owners to compete with each other. I'm looking at it from, well, we have the.
Something similar here.
well, so maybe, and Kirsten, look at, yeah, Kirsten, so there are examples of this category being used for things like, say, firemen and first responders, right, that have done this before, where they have these type of events and whatnot, and that's a sporting event, or they consider it to be a sporting event, and that's been allowable. If we're talking about, just maintaining our utility lines, no, I don't think we can get there, but I mean, if they're, using this to hone their skills and make them more likely to come and be here and work on it, sure, let's talk about it. Maybe there's enough here, there's enough of an organization around it to have to be considered a sporting event. I don't know. That jive with what you're thinking?
They'll
Okay.
compete in the best nursing care and the best child care.
I know. So it's all sporting event. Cool.
Our hydrant repair. Competition, find the ones that work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wildland firefighters up there, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and so as an example, right, so, I mentioned this with Monahan, right? So those high schools that can't afford to pay the ongoing, average daily rate for a lodging property, even on a weekend, because those rooms are filled with oil field workers, right? And so the rates are higher. And so the city does, or whoever has, used hotel tax revenue, and given that money to the school district to help them pay for their costs associated with bringing that or attending that sporting event, right? That's their lodging cost. This is also really commonly done in large cities for big conventions. I talked about that with event rental space, right? If you want to rent the Austin Convention Center, for example, and you've got a major citywide convention, chances are the city's going to be able to give you some incentives in order to pay the cost associated with renting the convention center. You may also ask, they may or may not say yes, you may or may not ask everybody else to see, hey, how about some money to pay for the costs associated with all of our attendees, all of our convention attendees, spending the night in hotels in Austin. If you haven't spent the night in Austin at a hotel in a while, you're in for a bit of sticker shock. It's crazy. Inflation has hit that town like you wouldn't believe, right? And so you may use hotel tax revenue for those types of events and activities in order to offset the costs associated with enabling those people to participate in the event.
So the city of Alpine also has a cap on that.
Yeah.
And then we have to do 15 for historical, 15 for art. Cap for sporting is.
Well, we did some voting remainder.
That's why I wanted.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about what other cities have done, right? And coming directly from Pecos and what we helped them with 10 years ago, right? You want to build a softball tournament or softball field, let's say, or host a tournament in the future. Can you use hotel tax revenue for that purpose? The answer is in the current law, no. But what have other communities done? Well, we've worked with them on legislation to allow them to utilize some hotel tax revenue to either enlarge an existing facility or construct a new facility, depending on the city or the county, and what they want to do. And what we typically ask for, as a compromise on that is that we want to ensure that there is some sort of return on investment for that facility long-term for the lodging properties. And some city councils change over, right? And the folks that initially embarked on this vision, to build this thing may be gone. And the last thing as an industry we want is to basically fund the development of, say, some sort of a sports facility, only to find out 2 years later, 3 years later, 4 years later, that it's used entirely as a local park. I love local parks, we all do, but that's not what's driving room nights, hotel room nights in the community. And so what we typically do is we write a return on investment clawback into the bank. And we can work with you on what the time frame is appropriate. Maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 15 years, whatever it is, we can talk about it. But at the end of that year, and it's most often 5 years, at the end of that 5-year period, make a determination. Well, the city makes a determination. They determine how much room revenue, hotel room revenue, is attributable to events that are held at that sports facility. And they compare that number with the amount of hotel tax revenue that were spent to either construct or improve that sports facility. And if there's a delta, there's a deficit there, they spent more money on it than was generated in hotel revenue, the city must reimburse the general fund with hotel, or from the general fund to the hotel tax fund, right? They have to make up the difference. But what's critical here is we're not comparing apples and apples. We're comparing apples and a difference. You're spending hotel tax dollars, say that's an apple, on the sports facility. At the end of that 5-year period, we're going to look at room revenues, not tax revenue. Room revenue, oranges, bananas, something else, right? And that's what we're going to compare it to, right? Because we know that you're never going to get a one-to-one tax revenue. That's okay. But we're looking at overall, how is the hotel industry benefited from this new facility? Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to make it work financially, right? So that's typically what we look at when it comes to that particular use of hotel tax. You would need a piece of legislation in order to enable the city of Alpine to do that. You would join the ranks of about 80 other cities that have the ability to engage in that type of activity with hotel tax. If you're a company, you would be a company in many other cities, including other West Texas cities, for use of that hotel tax credit. Yeah. Yeah.
And that be funded and sell tickets.
Yes. Sure.
And that.
Use for whatever. Yes. Yeah, I mean that's a variation of the councilwoman's. Yeah, it's a variation of your question, the councilwoman's question earlier, right? We're using hotel tax revenue in a way that's allowable under tax law, right? And then we're using revenue associated with from actually having an event, bring on that event. And what can we use that revenue for? Well, most likely anything. Promise anything, but most likely. Okay, let's do more categories. Talking about supporting facilities for certain communities. Let's talk about wayfinding signage and then transportation systems for tourists. Wayfinding signage. You may use hotel tax revenue for wayfinding signage that directs people to sites and attractions that are visited by tourists and hotel guests. We added this to the code a while ago when the state was at a budget deficit and they were trying to find ways to generate revenue. At that time, TxDOT was tasked with the role of wringing as much revenue from their sign program as they possibly could. And so, yeah, they were charging businesses a lot of money for those logo signs, but they were charging cities and counties a lot of money to put up the blue signs and brown signs and green signs that directed people to various sites and attractions. And so now cities and counties can use hotel tax revenue to pay for those sign costs. I don't care who owns the sign, you can use hotel tax revenue for that wayfinding sign costs.
Have
right?
you got any pushback from Petco?
No, they loved it because it was more revenue for them. Yeah, but even now.
Now, when you ask them to go.
Oh, and like, with as far as just not being responsive, I've got my issues with text on it. Probably shouldn't be recorded. There are always challenges to working with text on, but you at least have some money you can use for to solve, yeah, to get the approval, yeah. It didn't solve all the problems, but it solved some of them, at least as far as the revenue spent. Then the last category, this is only gonna apply to cities and not to counties. You may use hotel tax revenue for what we call a transportation system for tourists. Don't get hung up on the word system in that. Transportation for tourists. You may use hotel tax revenue to pay the costs associated with bringing people from a hotel to another hotel, from a hotel to a tourist attraction, from a hotel to the commercial center of the city, back to the hotel. It can be something you set up for a special event, be something that you run on, holiday weekends, those sort of things. Private entity, you can contract for it, you can do city services for it. Can't be general city or county, like bus service, that's not what I'm talking about, public transportation, this is tourist related. But you may have that event or activity, that busy weekend, those busy couple weekends of the year, where you need to bring tourists from the hotels out to, I don't know, name the place you need them to go to. You can use hotel tax revenue for that limited transportation system, right?
Does it have to be motorized?
No, and actually I get that question more often than you might think. No, the code says transportation. So, I mean, what's transportation? A bike, a horse-drawn carriage, a motorcycle. I mean, a motorcycle's probably gonna be pretty limited, but you could, right? The code just says transportation. So it could be a bus, no, it could be other things. Horse-drawn carriage, sure. Yeah, but remember, transportation though, it's transportation, right? You're bringing people, and you got a starter in at a hotel, right? So start at a hotel and end at a hotel, but you could, I don't know, hire a horse-drawn carriage to pick people up at the Hampton Inn, take them downtown, turn around, take them back. You could do that with hotel tax, provided that the people that are on there, mostly tourists. Yes.
Why is it city and not county?
Has to do with where that's codified in the tax code. So, I'll be very specific. So chapter 352 of the Texas tax code governs how counties may levy and use hotel tax. Chapter 351, the preceding chapter, governs how cities may raise and use hotel tax revenue. There is a provision in the county chapter 352 that says a county, barring any other law, may use hotel tax revenue as a city may use hotel tax revenue under section 351.101 of the tax code. Okay, we went through 9 categories, right? 8 of those 9 categories are codified in 351.101. The one category that is not is categorized in 351. I don't know, I think it's like 155 or something like that of the tax code. But the point being, the county chapter does not reference that specific section of the code. And it was like an omission, right? It wasn't like someone at the legislature, I don't think, some legislature said, now screw those counties, we're not gonna let them do transportation systems, but they can do everything else. No, it was just one of those things. The way the code was written and codified, it didn't include that category. Like South Lake, Texas, frankly, they're the ones who wrote that.
Oh, it's South Lake?
Yeah, South Lake, yeah, my formal hometown. Oh, okay, good. Okay, Carol Decker, that's nice. Yeah, all right, yeah. Thank you for asking that, yes.
And it seems like the general consensus is that those are imported into 352's
Yes.
county taxes.
Yes.
And that it was probably a little bit of sloppy draftsmanship.
Sure.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And you brought up fiduciary duty, and look, the bottom line here is, and look, we went for the categories here, I won't keep going any longer, but there is a duty for anybody who touches hotel tax revenue to have a fiduciary duty to the community, to the state of Texas, to the public, to utilize that fund, those funds in accordance with tax code and other state laws, right? It's fiduciary duty, it's something that cannot breach under penalty of law. Right, so if you're an applicant of hotel tax revenue, you're getting hotel tax money for your event, you've got to follow the laws as a result of that fiduciary duty, whether or not it's an ongoing basis, like somebody with a contract to receive hotel tax funds, or an entity that has a contract to manage use of those hotel tax funds, or we're talking about somebody who's going to take that money and spend it on their event, or of course you do finance, you've got this duty with every public dollar you're touching, you're already meeting that obligation, but everybody has that fiduciary duty to utilize hotel tax
And
revenue.
it means full disclosure,
Full disclosure,
and even the right to go to the entity that's performing the
Yes.
function for you. which
Yes.
is the county,
that's right,
And to audit their book.
that's right. Remember,
So it's wide open.
it is, so subject to open meetings, subject to open records, and this money is a public fund until the money is ultimately spent, right? And so any entity that's holding these hotel tax funds as a recipient of a hotel tax funding grant or a contract, they hold it for as an entity as fiduciary of the city or county government, the entity
And
that
it
ran it.
means a separate bank account.
Separate bank account if they're contracted entity, yes, sir. Yeah, subject to quarterly reporting, all those things, yes.
Now, in terms of our grants, I think none of our grantees fall under this because they never receive a sum.
They don't have a,
They
they're not,
get a reimbursement, which is the
Yeah.
expenditure, so the city is always in our case, is
Yeah.
always the one who spends the money.
Yeah.
We either reimburse, so that's the spending the tax money,
Yeah.
or we just pay directly the.
that, so I mean,
So they hand you, and these entities hand you a list of expenditures.
They give us the documentation, just.
Bingo, and you
Yes.
just have to check. Yeah, well, that works fine.
Yeah.
that's right.
I was just assuring the people receiving grants
Yeah.
that the city was not in a position to.
And I think what Glenn was at a point.
Yeah.
I don't know, I want to put words in your mouth, but I think really what you're referring more specifically to an entity that has a contract or an arrangement precisely with the city or the county government to manage hotel tax.
So, supposed to get any.
That's correct.
So we.
Right. And to build on that a little bit more, that entity's got to provide at least quarterly reports to the governmental entity about
Detail every expenditure.
and each other's measure,
Everyone.
and they're
Source, or
Yeah.
whether it be the purpose, who got the money,
right.
the whole 9 yards.
And their annual budget that is subject, that part of that hotel is subject to approval of, yes, we're. Where's it gonna go, sir?
Almost like Tony, but but that's what it says.
That's what it says.
Yeah, that's a fiduciary duty too, it's open to promote.
Exactly. It's public dollars. It's public dollars, right?
Yes, sir.
That's, that's why we have the art.
You got it.
Sure. Yeah. No, so I think here, that would be for the transportation system, right? But if we're talking about, like an artist in residency kind of program or some sort of an art.
You know, it's. We have these weekly events.
Okay, you're gonna be subject to the arts cap regardless. So I don't know that you're gonna get anything. I would just put that in the arts category overall and not worry about transportation system.
But if it had a hotel, if they were picking up the artists at the hotel, it could, if they're visiting.
Because they have to rent, they have to come and stay in a hotel.
Yeah,
And you pick them up, you take them to a site, basically a private location. You take them to another site.
sure.
Well, they are tour.
Okay, and so we're here. I still think we're gonna the arts cap, I really do, right? It's promoting an application of the arts.
But in what way is it not allowable as a transportation?
Oh, I think it's allowable to have big costs, but I don't think you could get around the 15% cap requirement or just by saying it's also a arts, or sorry, a transportation cost too.
Can you
right?
apply for funding in both categories?
You could apply for funding in both categories, but the 15% cap is gonna apply because it's primarily an arts-related event. Right, it's gonna count towards that cap on the arts, I'm afraid.
That doesn't make sense to me because you just said transportation.
It is its own category, but if it's primarily an arts-related event, then it's going to be categories of,
I'm gonna list it as their viewing.
okay,
I'm gonna list it their viewing,
okay,
the now.
yes, yeah, I mean, you can list it however you would like, and look, again, I don't, I'm not trying, I don't wanna split
So I
hairs
list
here.
them.
Sure,
So you apply under both.
Yeah.
and really- which one is the-
yeah, and look, I don't think we need to live and die by that, yeah. Oh, I think it does, but I think it also, but it's still promotion and application of the arts, right?
Do you think the amount she applies for art funding would still be subject to
Yeah.
50%
But
cap?
under
The
that-
transportation application would not be subject.
Is it primarily an arts related event?
It is, but there's a component that requires transportation and that amount of money, let's say.
No, that makes sense to me, right? But look, if it's still primarily an arts related event, then it's gonna be subject to the arts cap.
Well, but following that logic, Justin, advertising for that arts related event would also be
Yes.
subject to that 15% cap. That makes no sense at all.
Yeah, but that is the general interpretation of that, it's still subject to that 15% cap.
Oh, wait a minute. So we have a music festival, which is one of our largest tourism events,
Mhm.
and advertising that festival is subject to the 15%
Yes.
cap and not the 50?
Yes,
Makes zero
yes,
sense.
this is, I think, okay, I will. Okay, yes. So under the code, right, the language for the arts is application and promotion of the arts. Promotion of the arts, right? So if we're talking about advertising a specific arts related event or activity, it's gonna come into the cap. If it's advertising Alpine as a destination where wonderful art occurs, or music occurs, and we're not advertising, we're talking about the overall attributes and benefits of the city of Alpine, we can escape that 15% limit. But if we're advertising a specific arts related event or activity, it's gonna come into the cap, cap's going to apply. And that's consistent with how Texas for the Arts interprets too.
We're
right?
gonna count, we're gonna count grass plates.
That statement that was just like cut our music fund.
Okay, well, we'll come up with a creative way to enable you to do promotion of that music event, but yes.
Yeah.
I know, right?
I think we're gonna come back to the topic, but you can take it for now, yeah.
About the city of Alpine's, value about
Mhm.
like. That
They-
event, like,
So Bergen County has its own, so two things. One, Bergen County's laws are gonna be very, very much in line with what we talked about here this evening, right? There is one additional requirement for Bergen County, and that is they can spend no more than 25% of their revenue in the city of Alpine, maybe some of their revenue is in the city of Alpine. But they've got their own way of allocating hotel tax funds. They have a tourism council, the Bergen County Tourism Council. And they have an application process for hotel tax grants. They primarily utilize their hotel tax revenue on advertising and marketing Brewster County as a tourism destination. I don't know if they fund any events right now. They haven't for a long time. They fund some.
Well, they, when they were founded, they said, our mission is to bring visitors to the county line. And everything that happens within the county.
Yeah.
The county's responsible, those entities are responsible
The
for.
10 years I worked there, they never won.
Yeah.
All the advertising, it was travel for the advertising,
Uh-huh.
there was no actual.
Yeah, it was a big deal when they put up the various visitor centers, you know, those small standalone visitor centers that are unstaffed or whatever. That was a big deal, so controversial amongst the tourism council to take that step to get away from just doing advertising and marketing.
That
Well,
was,
and
Mike David said that was an act. They weren't on the.
Yeah.
They also began funding the chambers, the marathon and big.
That's true,
chamber,
yeah.
And that small piece of the fund is what has that flexibility. So those chambers might say, oh, I wanna do this event, and they'll use that little piece.
Right.
So those subsets are at the discretion of those chambers, but beyond that.
Yeah.
They do a lot of the sign.
Conservative signage and whatnot, and then including, yeah, some other aspects of cleanup and whatnot, yeah. So, so anyway, long answer to a short question is, yes, they have their own process and, you know, you're free to approach them and find out whether or not they do roll the fund, whatever it is. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I don't want to get really far in the weeds, which this could, but, I'm here also representing a nonprofit organization in Fort Davis that has a lot of various, aspects to it, but one of which is we are now working with Cornell University and some things to put together a hospitality training academy.
Oh, cool.
Because we have all the hospitality businesses, restaurants,
Right.
you know, hotels, whatever it is, and they can never find staff.
Yep.
And where they find staff, it's not trained, and there's constant training. We're working with Cornell and an organization. And we operate a commercial lodging and dining facility, which is gonna be the venue for this. So they can also get hands-on training there, intern there and all that. Is there any application under any of this with the hot money that would help support us in this effort? Because ultimately, it should produce ROI
Yeah.
for the business.
But it's in the.
In-
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think what I think there's a category issue here too, right?
Right,
So the question is, how do we categorize this in such a way, right? Even if we assume that the various people that are coming to put together the program, teach the program, attend the program, or staying, that's what category of the 8 categories does it fit within? And I don't know that it fits within any.
that's what I'm thinking, but
But, talk about legislation, right? Talk about using hotel tax revenue for new things that overall benefit the tourism industry. Education is something that I think we all agree we need more of when it comes to tourism, the tourism industry, right? And so if you have an idea, a proposal that for use of hotel tax revenue, that would be very much in line with building out a hospitality workforce in your area of Texas, we're very interested in working with you. Very interested. I'd love to. And I mean, we hear this from lodging, tourism, et cetera, you know, restaurant operators across the country. Finding access to good workers and people who are interested in our industry remains, it's harder challenge now than it ever has been before. And, you know, to the greater extent we can do that, it will benefit everybody. So, yes.
Okay.
Let's talk about that.
I'm a CPA and I don't know what visitors operating expense is.
Yeah,
It's a hard.
it is a hard thing to understand.
Yeah, so I guess where I'm going with this is I just like to feel that people are generally treated as qualified.
Yeah, so usually what we see most often under the visitor information center category are gonna be expenses related to staffing that visitor center during the time, and really should say this way, paying for the hours of staff time spent actually picking up the phone or visiting with people that come into the facility to ask questions, right? So that's really common. To pay for the infrastructure costs associated with supporting the visitor information center, utilities, rent, proportionate though with the facility's actual use as a visitor information.
Yeah, if you have an entity that has visitor information, but other functions, you have to make an application.
You do,
There's
and
no other way around it. You can't have 100%.
that's correct. And so your hotel tax funding is going to be will be limited by the amount of staff time and facility usage that's attributable to visitor information center activity, or maybe tourism promotion overall.
And I like the idea of having people keep timesheets
I
for
do
a
too.
month or two
I do
to
too.
get a feel for it.
Yes.
Because otherwise,
Yes.
you know.
That's right, and so you may have a situation where I see frequently on this is, we'll have the, again, chambers and easy target. Typically that's where it goes, right, it's really interesting. Have the chamber staff track their time over a period of time, and then do it again 6 months later or a year later, because things change, right? People come, people go, are we still, not where you are,
We're a tourist destination and 100% of my time is tourism and chambers. It is, I'll show you. I'll try my time.
okay, yeah, and I haven't seen the specifics, so I can't adjudicate the facts question here, but yes. But typically it's.
Yeah, no, where was I going? I don't know what I had to say.
Sorry, Glenn.
Well, I don't see how it's possible. Your Chamber of Commerce's goal is to promote the local business. And how can you say that 100% is going to the visitor center when surely you're doing something to promote the local businesses?
Yeah,
I don't see how you can, and local business promotion doesn't.
I would, for a situation like that, I would prefer to see it addressed in contract, right?
The contract says 50%.
Okay,
We
and
already have addressed it.
so, and then, so then the question in my mind comes to, are the parties meeting the terms of the contract?
That is the question.
And if the answer is no, then, we may have a state law issue, but we certainly have a contract dispute, right?
You have the issues of material breach.
Sure,
You do.
sure.
And there's discretion there. You don't have to reach for a gun, but you do have the legal issue.
That's all what.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't.
I know,
Get resolved.
yeah, yeah,
You can't have a piece of paper that's just ignored.
right,
It doesn't work.
sure.
What is the resolution for not doing things according to what is allowed?
Well, you withhold the funds.
That's right, and, yeah, you were.
It's the entity that brings the monies that's-
Well, that's the thing, I think it comes down to what the commissioners do. I think they're the decision maker.
oh, yeah.
I think it's an internal issue,
Yeah.
it's not a state issue.
Usually, that's the
It's-
case.
it's-
I agree.
We wanted to do it this way, everything is
I think you have to work it out.
diplomatic.
Yeah. Now, one key thing that you mentioned was, so you've got a visitor information center, which has
Yeah.
multiple functions, one of which is actually greeting a
Sure.
visitor, another being tourism promotion.
Yes.
Which is a key distinction. And I would submit that a Chamber of Commerce in a place like Fort Davis, that you're gonna have an argument, or of course, it's not 100%. Because you've got at least one plumber that might be a member, so, but
It
even
could be
when
a high percentage.
but even when doing member services at a Chamber of Commerce in a place like Fort Davis, you're promoting tourism businesses, that, I would just suggest
Sure.
I don't
that
think that
chamber
works.
activity.
If you're promoting local business, that may be good in the long run. I think for the community and the poor people, but I don't think that's correct.
I think it's, and I just,
You can make that work.
I would wanna look at the specifics of what they're actually,
activities.
what they're actually doing, right?
Yeah.
Like, what does this look like, right? Are we merely promoting, this local restaurant or this local retail establishment, via the chamber's action, or are we promoting the community as a tourism destination via our work as a chamber, right? And if it's the latter, sure, that's, would fit within 351-101-83, the advertising and other solicitations category, right? But this is where I think the terms of the contract are really gonna be so helpful. Because we're going to hopefully define what activities we want this entity, the Chamber of Commerce in this example, but it could be some other entity, what we want them to do with this tax revenue for whatever minimum amount of time and effort that we specified in the contract. And if they're failing to do that, then either, we can treat it as a breach of contract and go that route, or we can just decide we don't want to contract with you anymore. Right? Yeah, we're renegotiate it, right? Right, yeah, or they were lower, or, yeah.
But the governing body with that, just the commission.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, sure it
They're
is.
the ones who.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right.
If they could ask me, I could give a legal opinion, but they can do it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I think, yes, but to your point, Chris, yes, a DMO, destination marketing organization, right? They may or may not run a visitor information center, but their time should be compensated as they promote the area as a tourism destination or the advertising that I'm using the stations category, right? And so if they're the contracted entity with the community, I think that's what the contract should set forth. That this is what we expect you to do as, the DMO, right? Or we also want you to run a visitor center. Okay, that's what this piece of it's gonna look like. And so, that's how I prefer to see it. And again, it's gonna be something that's gonna be renegotiated on a regular basis as the needs in the community change, as the chamber functions change, or whatever organization.
Yeah, it might be limited to one-year term of contract anyway under county.
I defer to you on that. I would defer to you on that. I don't know.
I'm not 100% sure either. It's the safest course.
Yeah.
And why not?
Could we have a green sort of deal?
Free up.
I know in cities, it's pretty common to see a multi-year contract with an entity, but that may be different in county. Counties have their own specific laws and why.
There are.
Yeah.
So I want you to get your magic crystal ball out. So the state changed our annual reporting part,
Yes.
and now
You're
they're,
welcome.
yes.
Yes.
Is the state down the road gonna look at those fund balances and then try to take another piece of the pie?
No, the reason why we wrote that into law. We wrote that into the law to get a better sense that just generally how cities and counties are spending hotel tax revenue, right? So that, and I say we as a state of Texas, but not so that the state's not going to come in and hoover up that money. They're not gonna do it.
But who is? Because now every cities, and we've heard the county talk about it, cities do have reserves, they have
Sure.
fund balances, they have a pot of money.
Yeah.
Is there gonna be a cap, and at that cap, someone's gonna come in and take?
No, and not as far, that was not the intent behind that. The intent behind it was to get a better sense and a sense trend overall across the state of Texas as to how much revenue. Here's the thing, right? What I think you may or not be aware of this. Remember I talked about earlier how cities and counties, they govern their own taxes, they collect it locally. But that money doesn't go to the Texas Comptroller's office. No state agency looks at those funds, right? And so the idea is, how do we as a state understand how communities are utilizing those local tax dollars? How much of those local tax dollars are being spent versus not being spent? This is the general trend. I get asked by a legislator or by a committee, hey, how much money on average does a city have in reserve for hotel taxes? You know what I say? I have no idea. And I don't have any idea because nobody's ever gathered that information before. But there is this push for more transparency on how cities and look, it's not to say this information doesn't exist. It exists out there. You have a city budget, it's online.
Yeah.
But there's, 3,000 cities across the state of Texas. It's, nearly impossible to get a wholesale feel for exactly how cities are utilizing, and counties are utilizing hotel tax revenue and what they're sitting on. So that's the idea behind it. And the idea behind it is not to say, on average, a city has $300,000 worth of hotel tax money, and so therefore we're going to withhold $300,000 worth of sales tax revenue from that city to develop hotel tax. That's not the goal. Nor is the goal to say, you know what, you've got all this extra money, maybe your hotel tax rate's a little high, right? And maybe you should be collecting a little bit less as a result, right? That's also not the goal, and that's not, I won't say it's not the goal of certain legislators, it always is, right? There's a hearing next Thursday at the Capitol, I will be there, I will be asked this question. Feel free to tune in. That's not the goal behind it. The goal is to get a better picture as to how funds are being spent and not spent. So we added that to SB 1420 last legislative session. There was no answer to that. The comptroller wasn't collecting the information. We had no idea.
But then the comptroller doesn't make that easily accessible public data.
We got it. I mean, again, we're running. We got the data. I know, but the committee staff, the legislative committees have it. They have it, and they're the ones who want to know this question, right? So the Senate Economic Development and Finance, they're going to have a hearing on this on Thursday. And they have this data now, where they're able to look at it and make a determination as to how cities and counties are utilizing hotel tax, or you're not utilizing hotel tax. So,
So my fear is that either they're gonna do a straight tax across the state of Texas, no cities get a little fluctuation whatsoever. You're right, some bring in more, some bring in less, are there?
I think we would oppose that. There's all kinds of valid reasons why it should be, you know, stockpiling money. They want to build a facility primarily, right? And every city is going to be different. And there's a reason why different cities have different requirements as to how they can spend hotel tax.
So would be this. Hot tax.
No, I don't necessarily know that that's the case, you know, I think you do whatever your council has decided they want to do as far as hotel tax policy goes. If the policy is we don't want to spend all of our money every year, and we want to just save it for some future use down the road, that's perfectly fine. You know, if you want to say we're gonna build a convention center for it, so we're gonna allocate it to that, and then we're gonna decide we're gonna change it, we're gonna reallocate it for things. You could do that too, but I don't really, I am a paranoid person, and I'm not paranoid. I don't think that's what's gonna happen.
We'll talk after.
I actually think that going back, that one of the impetuses for the Alpine requirement then that those hoteliers believe that the council.
I think that's how the law was written, so I assume that's the case.
And not just enough on advertising.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah.
plausible. Very plausible. It is easier, you know, when you've got these expenditures, but maybe money's a little tight, you know, for general revenue, you know, gee, I can allocate
Yeah.
to maintain the courthouse. Give them raises, you know,
Yeah.
and things like that, because incentives are there.
Yeah.
But it leaves the hoteliers at large, they're the ones. who
Right.
think that-
That was the ones who were, you know.
So it may be able to, like you said earlier, but it may not be the wisest course in the long run.
We wrote it also, you were able to use a little bit of hotel tax money to pay your costs of doing the report.
Yeah, but when I do it in house and it's myself, what am I gonna do? Give myself a check?
I mean, you can touch your department, check from hotel tax funds. Okay, well, yes.
Last two questions. One is what trends have we been seeing in terms of hotel tax revenue? Here in Alpine, like, I guess if the system is working, and we would see increases in hotel tax collection over time. like that.
Yeah, we have trended up this year, the jury's out, so far, we're down to year to date.
It's been a weird ride out here, right? Because, you know, we did the pandemic.
The pandemic did not.
No, that's my point.
We actually.
No, I don't. But it created almost a bit of a bubble,
Exactly,
right?
that's exactly.
And so, and I won't say you're like, it's like a bubble's not the right analogy, because it's like something first, but it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit of a, yeah.
Artificially increased. Yeah, we're still trending up, I think, but.
We're trending up, but we're definitely lower. So we've had two anomalies. Running over here.
Wow.
Pandemic.
Everyone in here can see that. My question is.
I would say C.
It's not full finance sometime, but that's another. Rest and the talent at high cost. Are experiencing it.
Yeah, well, look, I take a little issue with the premise, just to, you know, full transparency, right? And the reason why I do is, and is I look at this and think, I hear this in multiple communities across the state, no matter from Galveston or in South Bruce County. Or in a Highland Lakes community, there's a lot of the same concerns. And the way I always answer this is, look, you want to talk about school districts. Primary local revenue generator is property taxes, right? And your property taxes are higher here. The revenues being generated is greater here. I would argue in large part because of the tourism activity. And I think if you transport yourself, say, one county to the east, right, it doesn't have that same level of tourism activity. And you look at their average property values and their property tax revenues at their city and county state game. You compare that with yours, and your quality of life here is greater. Disagree. Your quality of life here is greater as a result of that economic activity. I understand people move here for a reason, right? And they choose, or maybe they choose to stay here for a reason. And a lot of that reason for a lot of people is the location and the remoteness of it, and they may not welcome a lot of tourism activity. I get it, I understand that, right? But Austinite who's visiting your community, I get it, right? But at the same time, that's where I start from as a premise on that question. But to your specific question, what can you utilize some of this hotel tax revenue for to help the community overall? Well, you can do certain things like, I mean, some communities have built it, the sports facilities we talked about. Yes, there has to be this level of tourism activity. The locals get a benefit from that too. Maybe it's a convention center facility that also hosts some local events as well, right? Maybe a local, wedding or quinceanera or something else along those lines, right? It can't be our primary use of that facility, but we're able to benefit from that. Marfa used hotel tax money to help their airport, improve their airport as a result. Now, yeah, I don't know what tourism activity associated with that, but locals can use that airport facility as well. Right. So there are some examples of that. We love to talk about education, right? Educating the workforce, doing more there. We haven't done it yet, but it's something that is certainly of interest to us. Communities have developed convention center hotels and other types of businesses with hotel tax revenue that have created, downtown cores or aspects of the community. Again, some larger city stuff I know, but that the community has benefited from overall, right? So Odessa, we don't have to go very far. Odessa, bigger city for sure, absolutely. But that Marriott Hotel in Odessa, if you haven't stayed there or visited, that's a city asset. That is a city-owned hotel, right? That was built with hotel tax revenue, state and local hotel tax revenue that wouldn't exist but for hotel tax revenue. And all of the businesses that are ancillary to that wouldn't exist if there wasn't that hotel tax revenue investment in that particular facility, right? So those are sort of the things we're looking at here, and I think we look at as benefiting from tourism activity. And again, we talk about infrastructure all day, every day. I'm happy to talk on that conversation. We're worried about the precedent we set, but that's not to say there's not a way for us to get there on some of these issues too that are in the wheelhouse both of the local community and tourists.
Well, I want to say that the city kind of tried to offset the negative side of tourism because our locals enjoy the insurance.
No,
But those are things that our
Yeah.
community really is struggling with, that, in many ways, being a tourist destination has furthered those in a way that has
Sure.
to use this revenue solve.
I mean, I know I live in Austin, Texas, right? Our school district is underfunded as well, right? I mean, with $80 million budget shortfall for AISD in the next fiscal year, where my kid goes to school, right? I mean, right, housing is unaffordable in Austin, Texas, right? Our housing values have gone up 50% over the last 4 years. It's unbelievable, right? So it's and I don't like it's just it's not Your problems are unique, but they're not unprecedented when we look at, trends across other areas of Texas. And I agree with you, and I don't know, I think a more holistic policy solution here for the state of Texas is needed. I know that's not necessarily popular in the legislature, and it gets into partisan politics really quickly, which I wish it didn't like that. But in any case, I agree with you, in that regard. I don't know that hotel taxes necessarily are gonna be the silver bullet.
We're gonna need help with this.
See, she's got all of the answers, y'all, all of the answers. Okay, what other questions do y'all have for me?
Competitive rent subsidy.
Being a member of.
Yes.
We are not, right, Jeff Davis?
You are not yet. You are not yet.
Good, I'm hoping we will.
Thank you, I hope you will be too,
Yeah.
and we want. Yeah, so my, I didn't introduce her, this is my membership director and partnerships with that Carolyn McCall for Infinity, you all know.
Does that fall under, like you said, county needs to do that?
Yeah, so we are going to work with your county and county commissioners primarily, right, to bring in, Jeff Davis as a THLA member, just like Alpine is and Marfa is and others. Yes, because, and what we do is we list all your lodging properties on the state of Texas's tourism website. We work with you to help you make sure that you have the tools you need and resources you need to operate the tourism aspect of your chamber, right? You work with your county commissioners to make sure that they have the contracts and language and understanding of the law in place when they go about making policy decisions. We'll come out and train your folks on this, on hotel taxes, everything like that, your hoteliers, educate them about hotel taxes. Yes, we will be your best friend. You will not be able to get rid of it.
Can we spend hotel tax?
Yes, what's that?
Can we spend hotel tax to pay for your?
You may,
accommodation?
and you may be some hotel tax revenue to pay for our membership because we list all of your hotels on the state of Texas's tourism website advertising.
I think that's a great idea.
So.
I don't think that's-
So far, my biggest resource has been, thank God for Christmas, yeah.
Oh. I say it every day. So, well, and look, you all have a wonderful resource here,
No, he's not.
and.
No, I know it's not for sale, but.
What the French people to do. To promote this area as a tourism destination is amazing. And really is the envy of the state of Texas, really is. You do a great job, Chris. And, yeah. And you've been doing it, I don't say thanklessly, but I mean, with almost silently for so many years, and what you do is wonderful. So, yeah. Yes, and we can talk about that music. Let's talk about it.
Only asking.
I don't have anything further, I'm just answering questions.
Okay, sure. Did anybody have any questions about grant applications at all? Okay.
Would you do on the 14th? Yes, that did not change.
That's-
Okay, making sure.
And if you do, I'm around, so you don't have to.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, good meeting you.
Thank you.
Sorry.